Stop crying. Can we be friends?
She stood in the middle of that restaurant with soup dripping down her uniform, her one hand trembling, not from fear, but from the effort it took not to throw the empty tray at the woman who had just humiliated her in front of everyone. The entire restaurant had gone quiet. Every single customer. Every cook peeking through the kitchen window. Every busboy frozen mid-step. And then, the door opened. He walked in. 6 feet of controlled silence. A black coat that probably cost more than the restaurant's monthly rent. Eyes so cold they could frost a window in July. And he looked at her. Not at the woman laughing. Not at the soup on the floor. Not at the audience of cowards who had said nothing. Her. And what he said next, in a voice like quiet thunder, changed her life forever. But here is what nobody in that room knew. Nobody knew who he really was. Nobody knew what he was capable of. And nobody knew that by the end of that night, every single person who had laughed at her would be making a phone call they never expected to make. Stay with me. Because this story, it will break your heart before it heals it. Before we begin, my mum said this video cannot reach 10,000 views and 1,000 subscribers. Let's prove her wrong. Smash that like button, subscribe right now, and drop in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's get into this story. Her name was Adwoa Mensah, and she had been balancing things her whole life. Trays. Expectations. The particular exhaustion of being underestimated every single day of your life. She was 28 years old, Ghanaian-born, Atlanta-raised, and currently employed at Sora, a sleek Korean fusion restaurant in Midtown that smelled like sesame oil and quiet money. She had her mother's wide, expressive eyes, her father's stubbornness, and a left arm that ended just below the elbow, the result of a car accident when she was 11 years old that had taken her arm and, for a long time, her sense of safety. But Adwoa Mensah was not the kind of woman who stayed small. She wore her prosthetic on some days and nothing on others, depending entirely on her mood and how much she wanted to make people uncomfortable with their own discomfort. Today was a nothing day. A bayam day. A yes, I see you staring, and I have absolutely no plans to make you feel better about it kind of day. She tied her locks back, tucked her notepad into her apron, and walked the floor of Sora like she owned it. Table 7 is asking for you specifically, said her co-worker Priya, sliding past with a tray of dumplings. Again. Table 7 can wait like everyone else. Table 7 is tipping 30%. Adwoa paused. Table 7 is my favorite table. She moved through the evening crowd with the practiced ease of someone who had been doing this for 3 years, not because she loved waiting tables, but because the pay was good, the schedule flexible, and it left her evenings free to work on the thing that actually mattered, her catering business. A Kojwa's table, named after her grandmother, was just beginning to breathe. 2 corporate bookings. 1 wedding. And a dream that kept her going on the nights when her feet ached and her patience wore thin. She was refilling water at table 4 when she heard the laugh. It was the kind of laugh designed to be heard. High, sharp, performative, the laugh of a woman who wanted an audience. Excuse me, did she just carry that entire tray with one hand? Shouldn't there be some kind of, I don't know, regulation? Adwoa did not turn around immediately. She finished pouring the water. Smiled at the elderly gentleman at table 4. Set the pitcher down gently. Breathe. She turned. The woman at table 9 was perhaps 45, blonde highlights, a blazer that screamed corporate expense account, and a smile that said she had never once in her life been told no by anyone who mattered. Beside her sat 2 colleagues who were doing that particular thing cowards do, looking at the tablecloth, saying nothing, complicit in their silence. Are you speaking to me? Adwoa asked. Her voice was pleasant. Dangerously pleasant. I'm just saying, the woman gestured at Adwoa's arm with a little wave. It seems like a liability issue. For the restaurant. Food safety. You understand? I understand, Adwoa said, that you ordered the bibimbap, medium spice, with a side of soup. And that I have been carrying trays in this restaurant for 3 years without dropping a single dish. She tilted her head. But I appreciate your concern for food safety. It's very touching. The woman's smile flickered. And then, because the universe has a sense of drama, Adwoa turned to leave, her hip caught the edge of the service tray she had rested on the stand, and the soup, The entire bowl of soup she had been about to deliver to table 10, tipped directly onto her own uniform. The restaurant went silent. The woman at table 9 burst out laughing. Loud. Delighted. Cruel. Adwoa stood there. Soup soaking through her white shirt. Warm against her collarbone. And she felt the heat rise in her, not embarrassment. Not tears. Fury. But she was at work. And she needed this job. And so she held it. She held it. And that was the exact moment the door opened. He did not rush in. He never rushed. He simply arrived. The way storms arrive, quietly at first, until you realize the sky has changed entirely. The man was Korean, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black coat over a charcoal suit that was cut so precisely it looked architectural. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was all clean angles and careful stillness. He had the kind of presence that didn't announce itself, it simply rearranged the air in a room. He stopped inside the doorway. And his eyes, dark, unhurried, impossibly steady, found Adwoa. Not the laughing woman. Her. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the woman at table 9. Then back at Adwoa. And in a voice that was quiet enough to be polite and sharp enough to cut glass, he said, "That table. Clear it." The manager, materialized from somewhere near the host stand with the speed of a man who had been watching and waiting and praying not to be involved. "Mr. Seo." "Clear it," the man said again. "And bring me whoever is responsible for harassing your staff." The woman at table 9 had stopped laughing. Adwoa hadn't moved. The man, Mr. Seo, apparently, walked directly toward her. Stopped 2 feet away. Looked at her soup-stained shirt, her steady gaze, her bare left arm, and the absolute refusal to crumble that was written all over her face. And for the first time that evening, one corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more dangerous than that. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Adwoa blinked. Of all the things she had expected him to say. "It's soup," she said. "Not a grenade." That almost smile deepened by approximately 2 millimeters. "I'm Seo Junho," he said. "I own this building." Adwoa stared at him. "Good for you." Somewhere behind her, she heard Priya inhale sharply. Seo Junho looked at her for another long moment, the way people look at something they weren't expecting and aren't sure what to do with yet. "What's your name?" he asked. "Adwoa." She paused. "And before you ask, it's Adwo. Not Adwoa. Not Adwai. Adwo." "Adwoa," he repeated. Perfect pronunciation. First try. She blinked again. "That was unexpected. Go change your shirt," he said quietly. "And when you come back, I'd like you to serve my table." He walked past her toward the private dining room at the back, the one they only opened for reservation clients, the one that had been closed all week. The manager appeared at Adwoa's elbow, pale and perspiring. "That," he whispered, "is the man who owns 6 buildings on this block. Please do not say anything funny to him." Adwoa watched Seo Junho disappear through the private dining room door. Her heart was doing something she absolutely refused to name. "I'm always funny," she said, and went to change her shirt. The private dining room at Sora was a different world from the main floor. Low lighting the color of amber. Dark wood paneling. A single long table that could seat 12 but tonight held only one place setting, perfectly centered, like a throne at a dinner party. There were orchids on the sideboard. Actual orchids, in a restaurant that usually decorated with succulents. Adwoa stood in the doorway with a fresh shirt, her notepad, and the specific kind of composure that takes years of difficult days to build. Seo Junho sat at the head of the table, jacket folded precisely over the chair beside him, phone face down, both hands flat on the table. He was not looking at the menu. He was looking at the window, at his own reflection in the dark glass. He looked, Adwoa thought, like a man who had a great deal on his mind and had long since made peace with the weight of it. She walked in. "Your server for the evening," she announced, "is me. Which you already know. And the specials tonight are the black garlic short rib, the soy glazed salmon, and the spicy tofu jigigi, which I personally recommend even though a bowl of it assaulted me 20 minutes ago." He turned from the window. There it was again, that almost smile. Like it was trying to happen and he was mildly surprised by the attempt. "Jigigi," he said, You want the jigigi? Tell me why you'd recommend it. She considered him. The broth is made from anchovy and kelp stock that simmers for 4 hours. The tofu is silken but holds its shape. And it has a heat that builds slowly. You don't feel it immediately. You feel it a few minutes later. She tilted her head. Some people find that unsettling. Not knowing the heat is coming. Something shifted in his expression. Something attentive and quiet. Jigigi, he said again. And the short rib. Excellent. She wrote it down with the hand she had, swift and sure. Anything to drink. Barley tea. No ice. Noted. She clicked her pen. And will anyone be joining you, or is this a solo performance? Solo. She nodded, turned to leave, and then heard him say, quietly, almost to himself, "Why are you still working tonight?" She turned back. "Excuse me." What happened in the dining room? His eyes were direct. Not aggressive. Simply, direct, in the way of someone who had long ago stopped softening unnecessary things. That woman humiliated you publicly. Most people would have asked to go home. Adwoa studied him for a moment. "I have a catering business," she said. "It's almost ready to support me fully. Almost. So right now, I need every shift. Every tip. Every hour." She met his gaze evenly. "And I don't let cruel women steal my time. She's already taken enough of my evening." Seo Junho was quiet for a moment. "Your catering business," he said. "What's it called?" "A Kojwa's table." "A Kojwa." "My grandmother. She believed food was how you told people they were loved." Adwoa stopped herself, slightly surprised she had said that much. "I'll put your order in." She was almost at the door when he spoke again. "The woman at table 9. Adwoa paused. "She won't be returning," he said simply. "I've asked the manager to remove her reservation privileges." Adwoa turned slowly. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. I could have handled it." "I know that too." He looked at her steadily. "I didn't do it because you couldn't. I did it because no one else in that room did." The words landed somewhere quiet and deep in her chest. She stood there for a moment, this man with his dark eyes and his careful stillness, in this amberlit room that smelled of orchids and expensive restraint, and she felt something she absolutely, categorically was not ready for. "I'll get your tea," she said, and left before her face could say anything she hadn't approved. In the kitchen, Priya grabbed her arm. "What is happening in there?" He ordered jigigi. Adwoa. And short rib. The man owns 6 buildings. 7, I think, actually. She clipped the order ticket to the wheel. He said 6 but he had the energy of 7. Priya stared at her. "You are going to be the death of me." Adwoa smiled, a real one, small and private, facing the kitchen wall where no one could see it. She carried the barley tea back herself. He was working on his phone when she entered, and he set it face down the moment she crossed the threshold. She noticed that. The deliberate courtesy of it, that he put the phone away. That he gave her his attention the way some men give money, like it meant something. She set the tea down. Their fingers did not touch. But his eyes came up to meet hers as she leaned over the table, and they were close enough, just briefly, just for a heartbeat, that she could smell his cologne. Something dark. Cedar and something colder. "Adwoa," he said. "Him. When your catering business is ready." He picked up the tea, looked at it for a moment. "What kind of events do you want to do?" She sat down, not at the table, but on the edge of the serving station nearby, arms folded, because something about this man made her want to match his stillness with her own. "I want to do the events that matter," she said. "Funerals. Homecomings. Weddings where everyone cries. The meals people remember for the rest of their lives." She paused. "Not corporate canapés for people who don't taste their food." He was looking at her with that expression again. The one she couldn't quite file. "I have an event," he said slowly, "in 3 weeks. A private dinner. 50 guests. It requires a caterer who can cook Ghanaian and Korean fusion." Adwoa stared at him. "And before you say anything," he added, "this is a business conversation. Not charity. I'll pay your full rate, plus 20%, because private events carry additional complexity. You don't know my rate. Then tell me. She told him. He didn't flinch. Fine. She stared at him some more. You haven't tasted my food. He met her eyes. I'm about to. And when the jigigi arrived and he took the first spoonful and the heat, slow, building, the kind you don't feel immediately, reached him approximately 90 seconds later, she watched his expression shift with quiet surprise. He looked up at her. You were right, he said. Adwoa Mensa, for the first time in a long time, felt like something wonderful and terrifying was beginning. She just didn't know yet how terrifying the wonderful part would turn out to be. She Googled him. Of course she Googled him. She was a sensible woman. She sat in her car in the Sora parking lot at 11:15 at night, shoes off, feet aching, her phone screen bright in the dark, and she typed, Seo Junho Atlanta. The first result was a Forbes profile. The second was a Bloomberg piece. The third was a photograph, him, in a different black coat, standing outside a courthouse in Seoul 3 years ago, flanked by men in suits who had the particular stillness of people paid to stand between their employer and danger. The headline read, Seo Junho, the shadow behind SJ Capital, and the questions that follow him. Adwoa read the article with the focused attention she usually reserved for recipes she was scaling up for 50 people. She read about SJ Capital, a private investment group operating across Seoul, Singapore, and Atlanta. She read about buildings and companies and acquisitions made quietly, without press releases. She read about the Seoul courthouse appearance, a testimony in an organized crime investigation in which Seo Junho had been called as a witness, not a defendant, and had left without charges and without comment. She read the line, one carefully worded, very journalistic line, that said, sources familiar with the case suggest SJ Capital's holdings are tied to entities whose origins remain murky. Murky. Adwoa put her phone down. She looked at the restaurant door. She thought about the way he'd said clear it, and how fast the manager had moved. She thought about the men who had been seated at the bar tonight, 2 of them, Korean, both in dark clothes, both facing the door, both completely still in the way that people who are paid to watch rooms are still. She thought about the orchids in the private dining room that were there only for him. She thought about the fee he had agreed to without blinking, for a caterer he hadn't yet tasted. Adwoa, she said to herself, out loud, in the car, you need to keep this professional. She picked her phone back up. She looked at his photograph. His face in the photograph was the same as it had been in the restaurant, controlled, still, giving away nothing. Except she had seen that almost smile. She had seen him set his phone down when she walked in. She had seen the expression on his face after the jigigi's heat reached him. Professional, she repeated firmly, and drove home. She called her best friend Amma at 7 in the morning because Amma was in Accra and 6 hours ahead and already on her second coffee. There is a man, Adwoa said without preamble. There is a man, Amma repeated, and she could hear the smile crackling down the phone line. Tell me everything and don't you dare skip anything. Adwoa told her everything. The soup. The laugh. The door opening. The voice. Clear it. The private room. The barley tea. The catering offer. The Forbes profile. The murky. When she finished, Amma was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. He is a Mafia king, Amma said, and he wants to feed you. He wants me to feed him. Adwoa. Baby. That man did not hire you to cook his food. Then what did he hire me for? He hired you so he has a reason to see you again without having to admit that he wants to see you again. Amma paused. This is a man who owns 7 buildings and probably has people removed from restaurants with a single sentence. He does not need a caterer. He needs an excuse. Adwoa sat at her kitchen counter with her coffee and stared at the wall. He's dangerous, she said. Oh, absolutely, Amma said cheerfully. So are you. That's what makes it interesting. This is not interesting. This is a liability. This is the most interesting thing that has happened to you since you moved to Atlanta. Are you going to do the catering? Adwoa thought about the rate he'd agreed to without flinching, plus 20%. She thought about Akojwa's table and how close she was. She thought about her grandmother, who had always said the meal that scares you is the one worth cooking. I'm going to do the catering, she said. Good, said Amma. Now tell me, what did he smell like? Amma. What did he smell like? Adwoa pressed her lips together. Cedar, she said quietly. And something cold. Like the air before it rains. The silence on the other end was loud with satisfaction. You are done, Amma said. You are completely done. I am completely professional, Adwoa said, and hung up. She sat for a moment longer. Cedar and cold air. Professional, she thought again. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Atlanta area code. She almost didn't answer. She answered. I have dietary restrictions for the 50 guests, said the voice, low, unhurried, the voice of a man who had probably never had to repeat himself twice in his life. I'll send you the list. Adwoa closed her eyes briefly. Good morning to you too. A pause. And then, so quiet she almost missed it. Good morning, Adwoa. Her name, in that voice, pronounced perfectly, like he'd been practicing it. She was completely done. She decided the tasting would be at her place. This was, in retrospect, either the smartest or the most catastrophic decision she had ever made, and the jury remained out. Her apartment was small but purposeful, a kitchen that was too large for the rest of it, because she had negotiated it that way when she signed the lease. Industrial shelving. A 6-burner stove she had saved 11 months to buy. Copper pots her mother had shipped from Accra. And the smell, always the smell of something good, loud and deep, something that wrapped around you when you walked in. Seo Junho arrived at exactly the agreed time. Not 1 minute early. Not 1 minute late. Exactly. He stood at her door in dark jeans and a fitted black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, and she had to take a specific, medical-grade breath. He was not supposed to look like that outside of a suit. You found it, she said. Your address was in the contract. Right. She stepped back. Come in. Don't touch anything. He stepped inside. Looked at the kitchen. Looked at the copper pots. Looked at the dining table she had set with her grandmother's cloth from Accra. Deep blue and gold Kent weave that her mother had brought over and that Adwoa only used for important meals. Something moved in his face. Your grandmother's, he asked. How did you? She stopped. Yes. He said nothing more. But he looked at it for a moment longer than necessary, and she found she didn't mind. She fed him for 2 hours. Jollof rice made with a base that started 3 hours earlier. Keluele, spiced fried plantain, that she made with ginger and cloves and a heat level she described as politely assertive. Kontamaya stew over cocoyam. And then the fusion elements, a short rib braised in palm nut broth with doenjang and ginger that created something neither Ghanaian nor Korean but entirely, devastatingly its own thing. She watched him eat the way she always watched people eat her food, not hovering, but present, attentive, reading the body language of someone encountering something new. He ate carefully, deliberately, like he was learning something. After the short rib, he set down his fork and looked at her. This, he said, is remarkable. I know, she said. Not arrogantly. Just truthfully. Where did you learn this particular combination? Trial and error. And about 6 months of reading Korean flavor profiles until I understood how they worked. She topped up his water. I approach cooking like a language. Once you understand the grammar, you can make your own sentences. He looked at her with that expression that she was starting to catalogue, the one that was slightly longer than a neutral look, the one that felt like being read by someone who read carefully. The guests at the dinner, he said, are largely Korean. But there will be 3 guests from Accra and 2 from Nairobi. This menu would honor all of them. That was the point. She brought out the dessert, chin chin glazed with a sesame caramel, which was objectively a risk and also objectively perfect. She set it in front of him. He picked one up. Tasted it. He blinked. It was the first expression on his face that she could unambiguously read, and it was pure, unguarded surprise. What is? Chin chin. West African fried dough. With sesame caramel. She leaned her elbow on the counter across from him. My grandmother used to make plain chin chin for every family gathering. I've been trying to do something worthy of the recipe for 2 years. He picked up another piece. You succeeded, he said. And then, quietly, like he was telling her something private, my grandmother made a version of this in Busan. Different dough, different seasoning. But the same idea, fried dough for celebrations. He looked at the chin-chin in his hand. She died 4 years ago. Adwoa was quiet for a moment. Mine died 6, she said. I started the business the year after. They looked at each other across the kitchen counter and something passed between them, warm and wordless, the particular recognition of two people who carry loss in the same way. So, Adwoa said, before the moment could become something she wasn't ready for, do I have the job? You had the job at the Jigigi, he said. Then why did you need a tasting? His eyes met hers. That almost smile was doing something more serious now. I told you, he said. This is a business arrangement. You're right, she said cheerfully. Completely business. She was cleaning up at the counter when he said, casually, the way people say things they've been thinking about for a while, are you free Thursday evening? She turned. He was looking at the table. For what? I know a restaurant near Centennial Park. Korean. Not fusion, traditional. I'd like your opinion on their banchan. He paused. For reference. For the menu. Adwoa stared at him for a long moment. That's a date, she said. It's a research dinner. Joon-ho. First name. She watched him register it. That's a date. He met her eyes finally. And for the first time, that almost smile completed itself, fully, briefly, like a door that opened and then caught itself. Thursday at 7, he said. I'll think about it, she said. He stood, buttoned one button on his shirt, folded his jacket over his arm. You'll come, he said. Without arrogance. Just certainty. And the truly humiliating thing was that he was right. She wore red. Not because red was bold, she was always bold, but because her grandmother had always said red means you are not hiding. And Adwoa Mensah had never hidden from anything in her life, and she was not about to start over a man with good cheekbones and murky Bloomberg profiles. She arrived at the restaurant 4 minutes late, not on purpose, but she refused to arrive before he did, and found him already there, at a corner table, with 2 men she recognized as his particular kind of shadow seated at the bar nearby. He stood when she walked in. She hadn't expected that. He actually stood. You're late, he said. I'm exactly on time, she said, sitting down. You were early. That's different. Something flickered in his eyes. I'm always early. Because you like to see the room before you're in it. She shook out her napkin. I noticed. He sat down slowly. Looking at her. You notice things. Occupational habit. She looked at the menu. My father was a detective in Accra. He taught me to read rooms. She looked up. What are the 2 men at the bar for? A pause. They work for me. I know what they are, she said. I'm asking what tonight's risk level is. Seo Junho looked at her with an expression she couldn't file under anything she'd seen from him before. Something careful and, underneath the careful, something that might have been relief. The particular relief of someone who is tired of pretending the room is empty. Low, he said. They are a habit. Okay. She set the menu down. Order for me. You know Korean food better than I do, and I want to see what you choose. He ordered in Korean without looking at the menu. The server left. The restaurant hummed around them. You're not afraid of me, he said. Not a question. Should I be? Most people are. I'm not most people. She folded her hands on the table. And I'm not naive. I read the Bloomberg piece. I know what murky means in financial journalism. I know who you probably are. She met his gaze directly. But I also know that you cleared a woman from a restaurant because she laughed at a waitress. And that you set your phone down every time I walked into the room. And that you knew the word for my grandmother's cloth without asking. She paused. People are complicated. I know that better than most. He was quiet for a long moment. My family, he said, and the words came out measured, chosen, like he was laying them down rather than saying them, has operated in certain businesses for 3 generations. I have spent the last 8 years moving those businesses into legal structures. It is not finished. It may never be entirely finished. He looked at her steadily. I am not a good man in the way that word is usually used. What way do you use it? I protect what I claim. I don't lie. I don't make promises I don't keep. He paused. That's the best I can offer. Adwoa looked at him for a long, quiet moment. My ex-boyfriend, she said, was a church elder who lied to my face for 2 years. She picked up her chopsticks. I'll take I don't lie over praise the Lord any day. He laughed. Real, full, sudden, clearly surprising himself. It changed his face entirely. Made him look younger and less like a man carrying the world in his coat pockets. Adwoa felt that laugh in her sternum. Oh no, she thought. Oh, this is trouble. The food arrived and they ate and talked, really talked, the kind of conversation that moves fast and loops back and surprises you with where it ends up. He told her about Busan, about growing up between the docks and the money, about his mother who had wanted him to be a doctor and had never entirely forgiven him for the life he'd chosen. She told him about her father's detective work, about moving to Atlanta at 16 when her father took a security consulting position, about the particular ache of being Ghanaian in America, belonging to 2 places fully and to neither one completely. I know that ache, he said. Korean in Atlanta. Korean American by circumstance but Korean by every instinct. Where do you feel most like yourself? She asked. He thought about it genuinely, which she appreciated. Cooking, he said finally. When I cook. She stared at him. You cook? My grandmother taught me. Doenjang jigigi. Samgitang. Japchae. A pause. I cook when I want to feel like a person again. Adwoa thought about that phrase, feel like a person again, and what it said about how he spent the rest of his time. Cook for me sometime, she said. The words came out before she had approved them and she kept her face entirely neutral, as though she had said something as unremarkable as pass the salt. He looked at her with those steady eyes. Okay, he said. Just okay. Like it was simple. Like it was decided. They were outside after, on the sidewalk in the warm Atlanta night, and he walked beside her toward her car, not leading, not following, beside, and she was thinking about the laugh, the grandmother, the doenjang jigigi, and the particular way he had said okay, when a black SUV slowed on the opposite side of the street. She felt him change before she saw it. One moment he was the man from dinner, open, almost warm. The next, every soft thing about him retracted, and something else took its place. Still. Cold. Absolute. His hand, very lightly, very quickly, moved to her waist and turned her slightly, positioning himself between her and the street. The SUV kept moving. He didn't relax immediately. He watched it go. And only when it turned the corner did his hand drop from her waist. Friends of yours? She asked. No. Okay. Her heart was going a bit faster than she liked. Are we in danger? No. He turned back to her. His face was trying to be the dinner face again but the edges were slower to soften. I'm sorry. For what? For bringing my world near you. Adwoa looked at him, this complicated man with his hand that had moved to protect her without a second's hesitation, this man who apologized for it afterward, this man who cooked doenjang jigigi to feel like a person. Joon-ho, she said. Him. I've been in complicated situations before. She picked up her car keys. I'm Ghanaian and my father was a detective. Complicated is practically a love language in my family. She opened her car door. Thursday was a good date. It was a research dinner, he said. Thursday was a good date, she said again, and got in the car, and drove away, and allowed herself exactly 3 minutes of smiling before she stopped completely and called Amma. The night of the private dinner arrived in the way of important nights, with the specific anxiety of something that matters too much to be casual about. Adwoa arrived at the venue with her 2 catering assistants at 3 in the afternoon, a converted historic space in Buckhead, all exposed brick and candlelight and the kind of architecture that whispers old money. The kitchen was equipped to professional standard, which told her someone had planned for this specifically. She cooked for 5 hours. She was in her element in a way she was in no other place in the world, a general at her particular battlefield, tasting and adjusting and plating with the focused authority of someone who had studied this craft long enough to trust her instincts completely. Her one hand was a fact, not an obstacle. She had long ago built a way of doing everything, and she did it with the practiced ease of someone who had never needed anyone's permission to be capable. The guests arrived at 7. She watched from the kitchen window, the way she always watched, reading the room, reading the people. 50 guests, mostly Korean, men and women of a certain age and a certain posture. The 3 guests from Accra were bright in their Kent. 2 men from Nairobi in sharp suits. And at the center of it, Seo Junho, in a dark suit again, moving through the room with the particular stillness of someone whom the room adjusts to, rather than the other way around. He didn't look toward the kitchen. But she had the sense, specifically, that he knew exactly where she was. The meal began. She watched the Korean guests encounter the jollof. She watched their careful first bites and then the second, less careful bites. She watched the Ghanaian guests encounter the japchae she had made with palm oil and whisper to each other. She watched the moment when the chin-chin arrived as dessert and one of the older Korean men, heavy-set, with the kind of face that had seen everything and showed nothing, picked one up, tasted it, and closed his eyes. She felt that. After service, she was in the kitchen beginning breakdown when she heard voices in the hall, not from the dining room but from a side corridor, low and rapid, in Korean. She understood perhaps 40% of Korean from 6 months of immersion study, but she understood enough. Sharp words, someone's name repeated, and then Junho's voice, very quiet, cutting through like a blade through water. Silence. She continued her work. Junho appeared in the kitchen doorway 20 minutes later, when her assistants had gone to load the van. "The guests are pleased," he said. "I know." She was washing down the counter. The man in the center, older, heavy-set. Mr. Kwon. His important. Yes. He almost cried at the chin-chin. Something moved across Junho's face. His wife died last year. She was from Accra originally. He said, he paused. He said the food tasted like she would have made it, if she had stayed. Adwoa stopped wiping the counter. She pressed her hand flat on the surface and looked at it for a moment. "That's the highest thing anyone has ever said about my cooking," she said quietly. "Yes," he said. "It is." She looked up. He was leaning in the doorway, jacket off, watching her with an expression that was no longer the careful, managed thing she had come to recognize. It was something undone at the edges. Something that had been sitting in him all evening and had gotten heavier as the night went on. "Adwoa," he said. She waited. "I need to tell you something. About the voices in the corridor." His jaw moved slightly. "You heard. I told you. Detective's daughter." She set down her cloth. "Tell me." He came fully into the kitchen, which was a thing he hadn't done before, crossing the threshold, entering her space. He stood on the other side of the work table and he looked at her directly. "The men who were arguing with me," he said, "are associates of my family's older operations. They are not pleased with my restructuring. There is a disagreement." He chose each word like it was load-bearing. "It has been ongoing for some time and it is coming to a resolution. Within the next few weeks, it will be finished. And in the meantime, the people I keep around me are there for a reason." He held her gaze. "I am telling you this because I want to continue seeing you, and I think you deserve to know what seeing me might occasionally look like." Adwoa was quiet for a moment. "Are you in danger?" she asked. "No. Are you going to be?" "Briefly. And then it will be resolved." "Briefly." She repeated the word. "I don't love briefly." "I know." His voice was low. "I'm not asking you to love it. I'm asking you to know the truth of it." She came around the work table and stood in front of him, closer than the professional distance she had been maintaining, looking up at him with the particular steadiness she had built over 28 years of a life that hadn't always been gentle. "Seo Junho," she said, "if you get yourself hurt during your brief dangerous resolution, I will be extremely irritated." His hands came up, slowly, giving her every chance to step back, and settled at her waist. "I'll keep that in mind," he said. She had approximately 1 second to decide. She kissed him. She was the one who did it, standing on her toes in a kitchen that smelled of jollof and sesame, with the sound of Atlanta traffic outside and copper pots still drying on the rack, and it was the best decision she had made in years. He kissed her back like he'd been thinking about it since the soup. She did not see him for 4 days after the kiss. This was both intentional, she needed to think, and accidental, because on day 2 he sent her a text that said, "I have to deal with something. I'll explain when I can." And she had looked at that text for a long time and then sent back, "Okay, be careful," and then put her phone face down and focused on the 5 catering inquiries that had already come in from guests at the dinner. Word had gotten out. Akashwa's table had 3 new inquiries by Thursday and a full booking for a corporate event in May. Mr. Kwon himself had sent a note, handwritten, in both Korean and English, delivered by a man in a black suit to her apartment door, which was a delivery experience she intended to never repeat but also could not be anything other than moved by. The note said, in the English portion, "My wife would have approved of your hands in this kitchen." She cried, privately, over that. On day 4, Joon-ho called. "Are you at home?" he asked. "Yes. I'd like to come cook for you." A pause. "If that's still." "Yes," she said. He arrived an hour later with a bag of groceries he had clearly selected himself. She could tell by the way he checked the produce before he set it down, the way he knew exactly where everything was without asking. He moved through her kitchen with the same comfort she moved through it, and watching him, this man who ran a criminal empire with one hand and braised short rib with the other, was one of the stranger and more affecting experiences of her life. He made doenjang jjigae and japchae and a simple bowl of rice and they ate at her kitchen counter and he told her, in the quiet, careful way of someone reporting rather than dramatizing, what had happened. The disagreement with his family's associates had reached a resolution. Legal. Above board. 2 men had chosen to take a buyout rather than continue. The operations they had controlled had been absorbed into SJ Capital's legitimate structure. "So it's done?" she asked. "The first part." He looked at his jjigae. "There will always be another part. That's the nature of the life I came from." He looked up. "But I am closer to clean than I have ever been." Adwoa considered this. "Closer to clean," she said. "That's an honest thing to say." "I told you. I don't lie." "You don't." She twirled japchae around her fork. "My father once told me that there are men who are made honest by goodness and men who are made honest by what they've seen happen to liars." She looked at him. "I think you're the second kind." He was quiet for a moment. "Probably." "I respect both kinds," she said. "For the record." He reached across the counter and touched her hand, the one she had, the right one, his fingers settling over hers with a gentleness that was all the more startling for coming from a man of his particular weight. "I want to take you somewhere," he said. "Where?" "Seoul." "Not now, I know you have events." But, his thumb moved against the back of her hand, "I want to show you where I'm from. The real part. Not the Bloomberg part." Adwoa looked at his hand over hers. "I've never been to Korea," she said. "I know." A pause. "I'd like to be the one who takes you." She looked up at him. The kitchen was warm and the jjigae smelled like comfort and his grandmother, and her locks were undone from the day and she was wearing a paint-stained shirt and she was exactly, fully, entirely herself. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay. Don't act surprised. You knew I'd say yes." "I wasn't sure this time." "Yes, you were." But she was smiling. He picked up his spoon. Smiled back. The smiling looked good on him. She was going to have to tell Amma. 3 weeks passed. Adwoa booked 4 more events, hired a second assistant, and had a logo designed by a friend in Accra who was a graphic designer and had been waiting 3 years for her to ask. The logo was a table set with both a Kent cloth and a lotus flower, and when it arrived in her inbox she looked at it for a long time before she cried about that too, briefly, in the good way. Things with Junho were, and she said this to Amma with the careful precision of a woman who did not want to jinx anything, extraordinary. He texted in the mornings. Not long texts, short, precise ones. "How did the Buckhead event go?" Or, "I tried to replicate the chin-chin. Failed. Respectfully." Or, once, simply, "I thought about what you said." With no follow-up, and when she texted back about which part, he replied all of it. They had dinner twice more. A taco spot he had discovered with visible skepticism and genuine delight. A walk along the Beltline that started as 30 minutes and became 2 hours, talking the whole way, stopping at a food truck for jerk chicken that they ate on a bench like 2 people with nowhere better to be. He was teaching her Korean words. She was teaching him chi. There was a week-long argument about whether a kwaba or a yozio oseo was the better welcome, which ended in a draw and a kiss outside her car. She did not forget who he was. She was not naive. She was not a woman who dissolved into love and lost herself. She kept her eyes open, kept her sense of self intact, kept building her business with the same focus she'd always had. But she also let him in. In the real way. The way where you show someone your grandmother's tablecloth and mean it. It was a Tuesday night, 10:30, and she was in her kitchen prepping for a Thursday event, breaking down 40 pounds of chicken with the efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times, when her building buzzer sounded. She frowned at it. Went to the intercom. "Who is this?" "Me," said the voice. She buzzed him in. He appeared at her door in jeans and a dark crewneck, and he had, she stayed, a container in his hand. "I made samgyetang," he said. "I was at my place. I made too much." He paused. "You're working late." She stepped back and let him in. "How did you know I was working late?" "I didn't. I came anyway." He went to the kitchen, set the container down, looked at the 40 pounds of prepped chicken with something that might have been admiration. "You need a second pair of hands." "I have a system." "I know you do." He looked at her. "Let me help." She handed him a knife. He was good. Of course he was. She shouldn't have been surprised. He moved efficiently, didn't crowd her, matched her pace without trying to lead it. They worked side by side in her kitchen at 10:30 on a Tuesday, and it was the most domestic thing that had ever happened to her, and she couldn't stop the warm thing spreading through her chest if she tried. When the prep was done and they were eating the samgyetang, rich, deeply flavored, a chicken and ginseng soup that she told him, honestly, was one of the best versions she had ever had, she looked at him across her small table. "You came here because you wanted to see me," she said. "I came because I made too much samgyetang." Joon-ho. He set down his spoon. Met her eyes. And because he didn't lie, yes. "Just wanted that established," she said, and went back to her soup. He smiled. The full one, the one that changed his face. Later, when he was leaving, he paused in her doorway and looked back at her. "Adwoa." Him. "I've never," he stopped. Started again. "I haven't wanted to stay somewhere the way I want to stay here." She looked at him. "Then stay," she said simply. And he did. She woke to the smell of coffee. This was, in itself, notable, because she lived alone and she had not made coffee, which meant that Seo Junho was in her kitchen, and this was the first morning of her life that she had woken up to someone else's coffee, and she lay in bed for approximately 4 to 5 seconds just experiencing that. She got up, put on her robe, walked to the kitchen. He was at her stove, in her kitchen, with her copper pots, making what appeared to be eggs. He had his phone on the counter beside him and he was reading something, one thumb scrolling, unbothered by the world, and he was wearing his shirt from last night untucked, sleeves rolled, and she thought, privately, completely privately, in the part of her heart she hadn't shown anyone yet, "There you are." He looked up when she appeared. Took her in, sleep soft, locks loose, morning-faced, and his expression did something private and warm. "Gyramarie," he said. "Rolled egg. Do you have sesame oil?" "Third shelf, left side." He found it without looking away from the pan. "Sit down." "You're in my kitchen." "Sit down, Adwoa." She Saturday. He cooked. She drank the coffee he'd already poured her, dark, no sugar, exactly right, and she chose not to examine how he knew. And she watched him and thought about Seoul and her grandmother and Mr. Kwan's note and 40 pounds of chicken and samgyetang at 10:30 on a Tuesday. He set the plate in front of her. She tasted it. "Okay," she said. "Fine. You can cook." "I told you. I'm capable of being surprised." She took another bite. "You're going to ruin my standards, you know. I'm going to be completely insufferable to every other cook I encounter after this." He sat across from her with his own plate, one corner of his mouth up. Good. They ate. The morning light came through her kitchen window and fell across the Kent cloth she kept on the side table, a Cauchois cloth, blue and gold, the one she set the best table with, and she caught him looking at it again, the way he'd looked at it the first time. "When we go to Seoul," she said. He looked at her. "I want to go to Busan," she said. "I want to see the docks." Something in his face, careful, still, deeply private, opened slightly. "Okay," he said. "And I want to cook in your grandmother's kitchen, if there's still a kitchen." A pause. "There is. And you're going to have to eat my jollof in Korea and not make that face." "What face?" The face you make when something is better than you expected and you don't want to admit it. He opened his mouth. Closed it. That face, she said triumphantly. He laughed. And then she was laughing too, in her kitchen in the morning light, over Gyra Marie and coffee, and it was so simple and so extraordinary that she had to look at her plate so her face wouldn't say too much too soon. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it. Unknown number. She would have ignored it, but it buzzed again immediately. And again. She picked it up. The text was 3 words and a photograph. The 3 words were, "We see her." The photograph was taken from outside. Through her kitchen window. This window, this morning. Her and Joon-ho, at this table, right now. She set the phone down. Joon-ho saw her face. What is it? She turned the phone to face him. She watched the warmth of the morning drain from his expression. Watched the stillness return, the other stillness, the cold one, the one from the restaurant doorway when the SUV had slowed. He looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he looked at her. And his voice, when he spoke, was very quiet and very certain in the way of a man who has just made a decision that cannot be unmade. Pack a bag, he said. You're coming with me. Adwoa looked at him. At the window. At the photograph. Her heart was hammering. But her voice, when she found it, was perfectly even. Where, she said, are we going? He stood. His eyes were on the window. Somewhere they can't reach you. A pause. And somewhere I can end this. Permanently. The morning light was still coming through the window. The coffee was still warm. And Adwoa Mensah, who had never run from anything in her 28 years, looked at the man she had let into her kitchen and her grandmother's cloth and the part of her heart she hadn't shown anyone yet, and she stood up. Give me 10 minutes, she said. He looked at her. Something in him, something behind the cold and the stillness and the controlled absolute authority, broke open for just a second. Adwoa. 10 minutes, she said. I pack fast. She packed her grandmother's cloth last. Folded carefully, tucked at the top of the bag where nothing could crush it. Because wherever they were going, whoever was watching, whatever was coming, she was not leaving behind the things that told her who she was. She zipped the bag. Joon-ho was at the door. And somewhere outside, in the bright Atlanta morning, something dangerous was already moving. The question isn't whether Adwoa is safe. The question is, what does Seo Junho do to the people who made her unsafe? And what does she do when she finds out the full truth of who he is, and realizes she already chose him anyway? Part 2 is coming. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Drop in the comments, Team Adwoa or Team Joon-ho, who's your favorite so far?